not covetousness, one who rules his own house well, having his children in submission with all reverence. For if a man does not know how to rule his house, how will he take care of the church of God? Not a novice, lest, being puffed up with pride, he fall into the same condemnation as the devil. Moreover, he must have a good testimony among those who are outsiders, lest he fall into reproach and the snare of the devil. Titus Chapter 1. Titus Chapter 1. We begin in verse 5. For this reason I left you in Crete, that you should set in order the things that are lacking, and appoint elders in every city as I commanded you. If a man is blameless, the husband of one wife, having faithful children, not accused of dissipation or insubordination. For a bishop must be blameless, as a steward of God, not self-willed, not quick-tempered, not given to wine, not violent, not greedy for money, but hospitable, a lover of what is good, sober-minded, just, holy, self-controlled, holding fast the faithful word as he has been taught, that he may be able by sound doctrine both to exhort and to convict those who contradict. A lot of terms for us to look at, and our plan is to work through those in this class period. So that means not a lot of discussion on each one. We'll spend time where needed. But overall, I think we can see, just reading through, a picture being drawn for us of the type of man, the character of a man well suited to serve as a shepherd in the church. Your charge for this lesson has been to read through and to write down some notes, what you think those expressions mean. And our question being, what would God have us look for in a man willing to serve as an elder? That's what we're trying to see. And so to keep in mind, these are more or less a general characterization of the type of man we're looking for. And so we're going to kind of work our way through some of these. You've got the outline, and I hope you have some notes, because I'm asking you some questions. The idea of blameless, or above reproach, some texts would say. What is that supposed to mean? We're looking for a man who has no faults, a perfect man. Is that what we're looking for, a blameless man? What would you say?
Someone has integrity.
Integrity?
When they mess up, they make it right. They know what's right.
Oh, yeah. So there is at least the allowance that he might mess up, but he can fix that. He can restore that integrity, as you would say, Sarah. What else would we say, Gary?
Somebody that doesn't have such a big ego that when something's brought to their attention, they step back and say, yeah, you're right.
Yeah, you're right. I'm going to fix that. I'm going to make it right. All right, what else? Blameless.
Phrase above, I've always thought the phrase above reproach better expresses for our generation, our time, the idea that's here. And what we're looking for is somebody, let me illustrate it this way, somebody, if you hear a bad story about, you say, that doesn't sound like that.
Right, right.
That doesn't sound like he's above reproach. That doesn't naturally come when you're talking about this individual.
And I love that explanation, because I think that there's a lot of truth to that. You know, if something is said about someone we know well, we know their reputation, and we're thinking like, no, that doesn't sound right. That's not who I know. You know, that's the idea, I think. An aim in life to do what's right, and they're living to that way. It doesn't mean a man's perfect. It doesn't mean that he's always without sin, but when there is sin, he knows what to do about that, knows how to change that. A man whose character then is above reproach. What about temperate? The next thing here, the temperate. And some of these we might even combine a little bit. And as I think Ben mentioned last week, we'll notice there's kind of some overlap in a lot of these things. But the idea of temperate, how would you describe that? What does that mean? Even personality.
They're not going to fly off this way or fly off that way.
Yeah, kind of an even keel personality. How else would we look at that?
In well emotional control.
In in emotional control. It means he never loses his temper. I don't think so. But can control that. Has that control about him. We also have self-control. That's another one of the descriptions that's given that goes right along with this, having one's emotions, impulses, in control. It's funny, when we think about this, we always go to temper. We think about temper. He never loses his temper. Well, I think there's application to that. But the idea of being temperate or self-controlled, does it go beyond that? I mean, would there be other ways that a man should demonstrate self-control? Okay, I get your yeses. I'm looking for some application there. Yes?
Passion, just long, like you're passionate about something. You're on these highs, and then all of a sudden you're on a really low. These people have got that imbalance.
In balance, okay.
Yeah, so I mean, I'm very passionate about stuff. I get bummed out really quickly when things don't go my way. So don't fit the camera. But it's just we always think they're going to get bad really quick, or everybody thinks of the opposite.
And some people, we would know that, wouldn't we?
For a while,
Yeah.
they
Yeah.
got good balance.
Some people we would know, well, they can get upset real easy, or, man, they're really low today. We would see that. But Jeff?
The word temper itself, I think we use too narrowly. If you think of what it really means in the manufacture of steel, of metals. Temper steel so that it won't bend or lose its shape. And a knife won't lose its
It's not easily
shape the
moved.
first time it hits an obstacle.
Right. Okay, good. Okay, so I think there's some other, we can take this idea of self-control, temperate, what about, need to be self-controlled about how we use our time? Do we know some people that just can't seem to control their time? They don't use their time wisely? We know people like that? Sure. What about self-control with money? I mean, we know some people that just seemingly have no control of money. Just doesn't matter how much they make, they need more. Okay? Self-control. Self-control just with their attitude about things. Always flying here, flying there, ideas. So the idea of self-control, being temperate, even keel, so to speak, probably has a lot more application than just thinking of temper. Okay, Joe.
I like the description of Stephen, a man full of faith who's focused on Christ.
Right?
It kind of crosses all of these when you're
Sure.
in your faith. If you focus on your faith, then that's
Okay. All right. Right. That's good. All right. Very good. Let's look on. Sober-minded. Sober-minded. Some texts just say sober, and I kind of regret that because it might give a wrong impression. I think it has nothing to do with the idea of being sober as in not inebriated. As if we would even have to say that someone who would be looking at being a shepherd is struggling with alcohol. That is not the issue. Some texts more appropriately say sober-minded. It's the idea of what's in his mind. Wayne?
I would say that's someone who reacts appropriately to events and things that happen.
Okay. Thoughtful, a proper response to events that are happening around. Paul, speaking about younger men, younger women, older women, said this about the older men. Older men should be sober, reverent, temperate, sound in faith, in love, and in patience. I almost thought that's almost a description, a definition of what being sober-minded would be. All of that is focused on spiritual attitudes right there. Or what Peter would say would pertain to all of us. He said, be sober-minded. It says, be sober, vigilant, because your adversary, the devil, walks about like a roaring lion, seeking whom he may devour. And we would know and we would understand that as being wise, being sober-minded, thinking about the danger that's around with Satan. And so we can see that and we make that application, right? Tim?
When I think of sober-mindedness, I think of someone who can clearly assess a situation
Gotcha. Someone who can step back from a situation and say, okay, we need to think this through. You know, that there's not some immediate reaction, but we need to think this through and let's be wise about that, Sarah.
Awareness, a lot of what Tim just said, just awareness, because if you think about what everybody thinks of being sober versus not sober, you think of dull senses and not aware, not in control of your decision making or whatever. So I think being aware and the thoughtful decision making, like Tim was saying.
I think that's good. I think the next term we see here kind of goes along with what's being said right here, the idea of being of good behavior. And why I say I think it goes along is because if these other points apply, then of course we have someone who is acting in good behavior, led by sound mind and thought, able to think things through, kind of even keel in their thoughts, as opposed to haphazard. We might know people, or might be odd description of us at times. Haphazard, not thinking things through, kind of just bouncing from this idea to this idea. That's not the picture I'm getting from these descriptions, or being of good behavior. There's some stability that is implied with that. What about hospitable? The idea of being hospitable. I want to know first, what would we think that means? How would we describe or define that? And why would that be important for a man who is serving as an elder? Christine.
I think it's more open to invitation, not necessarily you opening your home or constantly do the inviting, but be open to invitations.
You know, it's funny, sometimes we think of hospitality as solely being the idea of inviting in. And well, there's application there. I mean, I get that point. I'm not minimizing that. But it's also the idea of being there when others are inviting too. You know, being involved with people. If we took the whole idea of being in someone's home out of the picture for a moment, just remove that. And there's someone who doesn't talk to anybody, who stands in the corner and, you know, just it doesn't come around to anybody, we might say they're not very hospitable. You see, that has nothing to do with being in someone's home. It is an attitude. But now, an attitude of someone who is easily greets people and wants to be with people and talks with people, you know, probably is going to spend time in their home, or is going to have other people spend time in their home. You see how that all kind of plays together? It seems that way to me, that works together that way.
I would describe that as a person that has a welcoming personality.
A welcoming personality. I like that. That's
People, when you interact,
yes.
pick up on that.
It is true. Right away, you pick up on that. I think that's a true statement. That's good, sir.
I think sometimes it's not easy for some people. Like some people are naturally given to having that
Sure.
open, welcome to my life personality.
Right.
And some people don't. So, you know, that's why I think it's good for when they talk about having a wife and a husband, sometimes maybe she's better at it than he is.
Sure.
And I think that's where that
She helps him to be the way he needs to be
welcome
sometimes.
people not just to your home, but into your life. So even if
That's
that's
it.
the ball field or
Yeah.
a restaurant. Or
Welcoming people into your life is a good description. I like that, Tom.
I think there's an aspect of it being someone who has an understanding of when, where, and how relationships are
Sure.
developed and cultivated.
Sure. I mean, why is this so important for an elder, for a church shepherd? Why is this so important?
so you can know his flock.
Know the flock and go on with that. And so they know him, right?
And so we can be comfortable going.
To be comfortable, so that sometimes when there's that day where there's an issue and something needs to be talked about some, that it's not with dread that we pick up the phone and say, hey, you have time to talk for a minute? But we're comfortable. We know I can talk with him. You know, we have that. We know we're comfortable with that.
I think it's important that he be responsive to strangers
Sure.
who come amongst us. He needs to be able to approach those people and talk to them and find out what their needs are, especially.
And you know, with the idea of hospitality, I think that this is a strong point. I mean, definition is one who is willing to entertain even strangers, you know. And so we think of it sometimes, we're making application just about those within the flock. Important. I think there's this aspect as well, the ability to reach out even to those who are strangers. It's describing an attitude, is what it is, Joe.
I think when people have spent time with you throughout your life and they feel rapport with you, when they approach you about issues, it's much more meaningful as opposed to someone who just comes to you with this problem. So I think that hospitable pattern of life where you show that you are hospitable to people when things are good,
Yeah.
when you actually come with an issue, it's more.
It helps. If you have demonstrated the ability to be friendly, you know, as the wise man would say, to have friends, you must first be friendly in the Proverbs. And if you have demonstrated that, then when there is a problem or an issue, sure, it's a lot easier to approach somebody that way. All right, not addicted to wine or not given to wine. Okay, so what is that supposed to imply? Why is that important? How would we deal with that? What is that's supposed to mean? I mean, I'm going to go ahead and just kind of put my thoughts out here on this. You know, is that, and there's been some sermons preached on this. I'm just not getting or seeing where in the life of a Christian that drinking of alcohol has a place. You know, we can't find anything in Scripture that talks about the wisdom of drinking strong drink. We can sure find passages that teach about how unwise it is to do this. And so in some ways, I look at a passage like this, not given to wine, it's kind of like, well, yeah. I mean, I think that's just almost kind of a given. Why is this even listed? Why is this important? Why do you think that it was, there's a reason it's here.
It affects your judgment.
Judgment. You know, we've talked so much already in previous lessons about the idea of shepherds being able to lead with wisdom and good judgment. Why would they want to have even a little bit of something that would cloud judgment? I think that application is true for every one of us. But in particular, when we're talking about in the eldership, I mean, whether it's wine or any kind of drugs or medications that would cloud our judgment, we see the danger with that, I think. Tim?
Being addicted to something kind of implies that a person has to escape reality.
Mm-hmm.
And that in itself is a problem. Because if I have a problem facing reality, how am I going to lead people?
That's a good point too. That's a good point.
Look at the other things that we've already talked about in how they connect.
Absolutely.
And then when you look at this, someone who would be given to wine or possibly addicted to that, and how that can affect every one of the things that we've already talked about.
Absolutely. Well, and we've talked about so many of these characteristics have something to do with self-control. This too. That's not different in that way, Tim.
So as a pharmacist, we learned that an addict, somebody who's addicted to a drug, will continue to use that drug when there are negative consequences throughout their life and continue to use it anyway.
Right.
And so I think that's, where when we look at somebody, if they're addicted, frankly, to anything that has negative consequences,
Sure.
whether it's behavior or other vices, that, that would obviously stray them away from the vision that we see that they should have.
Absolutely. Right. Very good. All right. Good thoughts.
So, just kind of a reason for that in this Romans where it's talking about several things. It brings up the word sorcery.
Mm-hmm.
The original Greek word actually stems from pharmacia, which actually means an altering
That's right.
fake,
Altering state.
fake reality.
Mm-hmm.
So it's, again, going back to the mind of the next any type of drug or any type of, to me, it's like self-control can be anything that's abused, sex can be abused.
Sure.
Food can be abused, all those things. It's not just,
Being in control.
being consumed.
It is interesting to me how many of these different words, while they do have some different meaning to them, we see the connection to personal self-control in like almost everything. We see that. The next term, not violent, not a striker. Again, the idea of being in control. You ever know somebody that just seems to always be ready for a fight? And I don't necessarily mean a fist fight. You know, some people are just ready to debate and argue anything. Worked with a guy for a while. I used to say, like, man, you could argue with a tree and you would lose, but you would still think you won. He was just this attitude. He had to debate and argue everything that was said. And it didn't work well in even the work environment. But can you imagine, you know, that kind of an attitude in a church? Sometimes it happens and it has to be dealt with. But a man serving as an elder certainly can't be that way. How is he going to deal with that problem if he's the same type? And the idea, too, of, you know, being argumentative or quarrelsome, how that doesn't work in a church environment, doesn't work at home, doesn't work in the work environment, workplace. But what about elders who are trying to lead the church and work together and having to discuss difficult things? And there's someone who's just quarrelsome? Oh, that's not going to work.
Not a bully.
Not a bully.
It's one thing to want to argue debate. There are people who do that. But using a position or an intellect or a wisdom or not to bully someone into submission is much different than convincing or exhorting
Sure.
or some of these other things that we might do.
Sure, absolutely. I mean, sometimes does someone need to be won to a new position? Yes, but doing so with wisdom and by teaching. Paul wrote it this way in Titus Chapter 3, avoid foolish disputes, genealogies, contentions, strivings about the law, for they are unprofitable and useless. That kind of attitude just will never work. Right after that comes patient, Alan, go ahead.
We'll say this, that even though this particular scripture that I'm going to reference is not talking specifically about elders, it does talking about wisdom that comes from above. And that's
Yes.
in James 3:17, where
That's
it
right.
says that the wisdom that comes from above is willing to yield. It uses that term, willing to yield.
Sure.
And so what you're talking about here in this contentions and strife and all that, there can be personalities that they just have to have their way.
That's right.
You know, and they'll have their mind made up, and there's just no moving them off
Yeah,
of that.
yeah, no convincing.
It doesn't matter what you have to say,
Yeah,
and so that's very important if you're going to have a successful relationship with a congregation.
right.
If there's going to be a successful relationship among an eldership, you've got to have it in the back of your mind that, you know what, I don't always have all the information, and I don't see it as clearly as maybe my fellow elder might.
Right,
And I need to shut up and listen to him.
right.
And so there's a lot of that willing to yield, I think, that covers a broad spectrum of getting along.
This next word that we're looking at, I think, kind of becomes the opposite of what we're just talking about. A poor attitude, contentious. The next is being patient or gentle, which is like just going to the complete opposite right there. Yielding is the way some would define that. Being gentle, courteous, kind, understanding. They just totally switch right there. A characteristic that is so needed in an elder. Aren't you kind of concerned or afraid almost to go to some people to bring up something that you know that they'll be contentious about? You know, imagine when there's something we feel like we need to go to an elder and talk about, and we're afraid to go talk to him because that's his attitude. Well, he shouldn't be an elder to begin with, should he? But instead, we're looking for someone who is patient and gentle, approachable, compassionate. And we see the need of that. Not quick to act or judge, but careful about what is being said. The next thing we look at here is the idea of being free from the love of money, not greedy for money. Why would this be a concern for a man serving as an elder? You know, not greedy for money. Okay. You know, a separation of focus here. If the focus is just on material things, worldly things, if that's our focus in life, how are we going to lead the church of God? How are we going to do with spiritual things if we don't have a spiritual mind? Now, the idea is You know, sometimes I hear people say, you know, money is the root of all evil. No, that's not what the text says. You know, money is the root of all kinds of evil. The love of money is the root of all kinds of evil. There's a difference here. And here, we're talking about one who should not be greedy for money, you know, inordinate desire for money, or ungodliness in the gain of money. I mean, we're talking about issues that not just prohibits one from serving as an elder, but we have other issues to deal with here, right? Is the idea. If a man is focused on making money and gaining riches, that's just his focus in life. Number one, doesn't have the time to serve in the eldership, but needs to get some personal issues in line. What about a good reputation? Good reputation among those outside of the church. Why is that even here? Why is that in consideration here?
Because you're trying to bring people to God. So
Yeah.
if they hear that you're an elder of a church, and you're going to talk to you, you're
Right.
at work, they're going to go, well, evidently that church. Yeah.
So, is it possible that somebody could act differently when they're sitting in a pew than when they are outside? Yeah. We're not talking just about eldership issues, okay? But you know, a man who would be qualified to serve is a man whose reputation is good inside and out. And it's like, well, how would we even know? How would we even know what a man's reputation is outside? How would we know? By association with them. If we know nothing about their reputation outside, I would suggest we don't know him very well. That may be an issue, going back to the hospitality thing even. You know, we have to know something about the man, be close enough to him to know something about him. And so, you know, this idea of being of good reputation, you know, it helps us to, we would know that this is a man who deals fairly and shows respect and courtesy. He's morally upright among men. This is his reputation. Not self-willed. This kind of goes along with some things we've already talked about, but let's spend a moment with it. Not self-willed. Why would that be a problem? If a man was self-willed, why would that be a problem? Not unable to understand or unable to listen to other viewpoints. You know, it's got to be my way. This is the way it is. This is my opinion. It ought to be yours too. Used to be a guy on the radio. He would say that all the time. That's my opinion. He give his opinion moment. That's my opinion. It ought to be yours too. You know, that's just not going to work, Marcus. A self-willed man cannot be a leader. Not a good one.
I heard another guy say, well, I could agree with you, but then we'd both be wrong.
Yeah. Okay. Well, kind of know where he stands, don't you? You know, Tony.
If you're self-willed, you don't follow the will of God. You're mastering yourself and not mastering.
In the big picture, you know, if we are totally self-willed, then even God's will does not matter to us. That's how big that can go. Okay, we've talked about here not quick-tempered, not soon to be angry. You know, we've kind of touched on some of this already. You know, quick-tempered persons are those who just lose no time at being angry. They can fly off the handle. And if a man has not been able to come to some control of his temper, just think about and imagine the problems that is going to pose. You know, to not be angry quick means he's not going to fly off the handle. You don't have to worry about if you say something to him that he might not like, that you're going to get dressed down, that he's going to get angry with you. You know, that should never be a concern. You know, Proverbs 15 and verse 1 says, a soft answer turns away wrath, but a harsh word stirs up anger. It does. It can just escalate a situation. Maybe that's already a little bit difficult, and that's just not going to work well. Just or upright. You know, what is the idea of being just or upright? What's that say about the character of a man? Fair and honest, you know, is a good way. It's the idea of right, right conduct. You know, we say of some people, even they have some action, we say, well, man, they just don't even know better. A man who is just knows better. Why does he know better? Because he knows something about the will of God. I mean, when we look at just, Jesus is described as just. You know, and if we are working at having the attitude and the character of Jesus, then we want to be just as well. We think about, as we talked about, looking at elders as looking at their faith and their example. And as the Hebrew writer says, whose faith follow. We follow them because we know something about their faith. We know that they are just and righteous. There's another term that comes right along after this, holy or devout. Give me some explanation of that, being holy or devout. What does that mean?
I like looking at synonyms, and one of the synonyms that to me helps describe what we all should be for holy is dedicated.
Dedicated, okay.
It's a different, but it so goes with this. If you are holy, if you are sanctified, if you have dedicated your life to God, then that follows.
It does. It would naturally follow. You remember when Peter said in 1 Peter Chapter 1, he says, he was quoting God, he was quoting the Old Testament, be holy as I am holy. Remember that? You know, it's the idea. It's not saying I'm perfect, I'm just like God. But here was the goal. This is what was said to the children of Israel long before. God said, be holy as I am holy. And that's what we're trying to do. And that is what is seen of us, that we're trying to follow that pattern that the Lord has given. Holiness must be evident in our life. You know, you think about all of these descriptions, these words of a man who would serve as an elder. Don't we find that we would want these descriptions made and said of us? I mean, isn't it kind of what we're all trying to aspire to, that we would live this way, that people would look at us and say, you know, that's someone who's just, there's someone who is holy, there's someone who is righteous. You know, it doesn't matter how stressful the situation gets, there's someone that can kind of step back and diffuse the situation. See, all of these descriptions, wouldn't we want them to be applied to us? But as we're looking at, you know, for men to serve in the eldership, we're looking for men that have already demonstrated these things. Someone said, well, how do we know a man who is fit to serve? I hope we're understanding that better now. Men that we know well enough that we have seen these attributes in them. They have demonstrated these things. Their experience in life has helped to mature them. Their understanding of God's word is what has made them. So much so that these attributes, we read through these and we go like, well, I know a man that's like that. This is describing someone I know. You know, that's what we should be thinking. And so I hope it's helpful for us just to kind of go through these. We went through them pretty quick, but I think we're understanding the picture on these and what it means. David and then Joseph, real quick.
It was said earlier, the concept of being above reproach. I think a good description that was given was if a person is accused of something, being above reproach, and say, well, that doesn't sound
Right.
The flip side of that is all these characteristics that are positive characteristics. If you're thinking about a person and you name one or more of these characteristics, would you say, yes, that sounds like that person?
Right.
If you can't say, yes, that sounds like that person,
He's not above reproach. Yeah. Okay. Right. Good. Joseph.
In verse 6 it says, if anyone is above reproach, the husband of one wife, and his children are believers. How do we use that really the last part, about the children being believers,
Okay.
looking at qualifications?
Okay. Good segue to pick up lesson number 10 in the hallway. Because next week, I mean, that's Joseph, that's where we're going next week. All right. So we have this one more category, so to speak, you know, family relations, you know, that we're going to. We've worked through all of these different qualifications, these characteristics. What about his home life? That's where we have to go next week. Please pick up that outline, and we'll look forward to working on that next week. Thank you for being here.